David, I'm glad to have you on the show today. David is the Chief Customer Officer of Disco, and really just a great thought leader on LinkedIn. If you're not following already, you should. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you. Thrilled to be here. Always great to have a conversation with you. I enjoy everyone.
Awesome. So, if you could maybe set the stage, as you know, the premise of the go-to-market blind spot, industry leaders talking about something that came up that maybe wasn't so obvious on the surface and took a little bit of pulling at the threads to identify the root cause of a challenge you faced in your chief customer officer position.
Yeah. Look, I think there's so many things we could talk about, but maybe the thing I would share is this, and I'll get to a very specific example for you. But I think we talk a lot that if you think about customer success, it's not just a department, right? It's a company mindset, and that's something I think people talk a lot about. But I think what happens every day when you're really struggling with the challenges, because what happens is all the company's inefficiencies leak towards the customer. So what happens? CS people have to deal with all those customer challenges, and it's really easy to let yourself believe those challenges are caused by other things. They're caused by a salesperson setting a bad expectation. They're caused by product missed a delivery date, whatever those things are. But the really hard thing to recognize is sometimes the problem is actually us. And so there was a situation I remember where we were really struggling to deliver certain insights to customers. And it's really critical in the business we have that moment we show up to deliver insights for customers, that it's really meaningful, that we're really hitting the mark. It's one of the most important things that we do on the CS team here. And we were noticing some real friction with these customers. And so it was easy for us to say, the issue is they just had bad expectations. This part of our product didn't work right. But then we started letting the data actually speak to us and started to watch and listen and do analysis on what was happening in conversations with customers. And what we realized is the problem was us. There was a certain part of those conversations where there was data that we were showing to customers that was extremely confusing for them. And a 45-minute conversation, 30 minutes of it would be spent talking about this one data point that was confusing to the client that really wasn't that relevant. And we were letting that happen. And there was product work that needed to happen to solve it, but it was our fault. And so I think sometimes when it's easy to want to blame other people for problems, the best place to start is looking in the mirror and say, maybe I'm part of the problem too. And so we put in some really great corrective action. We changed how we were talking to customers. We changed what we were showing them. And using data, we were able to see the big impact. But we had to be willing, which is not the easiest thing to do, to look in the mirror and say, maybe, in a world that's very connected, where the whole company has to connect and work together to solve customer problems, the problem's us.
Yeah, I I think that's a really important point, and I hate to say it, but I think it's true that so frequently when you speak with CS individuals, leaders, there's a lot of finger pointing, and not always the introspection. So I think this is a really important topic. And before we get too deep into it, I realize I should take a step back. Can you kind of give a little context about Disco and your team? Like when you talk about insights, what is this, a QBR, or is it just what are you specifically talking about insights within?
Yeah, and so Disco's got customers that span from media companies to some of the largest brands in the world that are all over your house, to agencies that do a lot of work on behalf of those brands. And they get value from us in a couple different ways. One of the ways is they can log into our platform. And what we're doing for them is measuring the effectiveness of their advertising so they can use our platform to understand if different ad campaigns are driving impact on consumers around a whole set of KPIs. But what some of those customers want us to do is actually really manage that process for them and do all the work that then results in some reports that we deliver to them that walk them through the effectiveness of their campaign. And that moment of sharing those insights, instead of them going into our platform and getting it, we actually show up as the expert in the room and share that with them. We do a lot of that work. We're working with large organizations that needed some sophisticated analysis, and we have a particular set of experts that are really good at that. And so that's when I say deliver insights, This is not even in our platform. It's when humans are showing up. And I think all the time, what a great privilege that we get to represent all the hard work the company does out to customers, but we got to get it right, right? Like the whole company trusts us to show up and take all of our hard work and turn into an insight for a customer. And so that's what when I talk about that example, that's what we're doing. We have a lot of customers that log into a platform and self-serve those insights too. But we've got some real experts that show up and unpack those insights for customers and connect them to those customers' business needs.
Got it. That's helpful context. And so I guess you talk about that, looking inward and realizing the example you gave of like going 30 minutes in, discussing a metric that's confusing to the end recipient of that presentation. Like, how did you unpack that? How did you identify that that was the actual problem? Like, was it call recordings, or just what specifically were you diving
It
into?
was call recordings were a big part of it. AI analysis on top of those call recordings, looking at where we were spending time, doing some analysis on what the follow-up conversations were, connecting. Were those customers then coming back and saying, we want to go do 3 more campaigns with you? So the root was really, it's all rooted in data. Like in the end, we got to be data driven. So it was data coming from call recordings, data coming from next set of opportunities with those customers. We could just look at the call recordings and just look at where time was being spent and realized how little of it was being spent on the things that mattered most, that we really wanted to deliver for customers, and how much of it was spent on something that really didn't matter. But the hard part was, it was really tempting to say, well, that's the way our product works. That's the expectation we set with the client. It was literally on us, right? We were the ones allowing that to happen because we were the ones who had the opportunity to guide the conversation to something different. So we just had to really look at the data and be intellectually honest enough to look at that data and say, what was that data telling us? And what it was telling us was the problem started with us. Like the call was coming from inside the house.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
was our challenge.
And you say we, like who's we that's determining this? Is this you looking across the whole company? Is it managers that are looking at their individual teams? Like how do you kind of codify and like centralize this learning for the organization?
Yeah, it really started. So part of what the heart of this was, as we've been on a bit of a journey over the last couple of years to really get to a place where one of our core values is champion the customer. And it's not an aspirational one. It's one we really live out, but it took us a while to get there. And part of how we got there is as an executive team, we just started listening to customer conversations, spending more time with customers. And part of that was to do a little deeper dive on how it was going in those moments that kind of matter where you're trying to deliver those insights to clients. And so when we saw that, then, so we saw that at that executive level, brought that back to the other leaders on the CS team. And that's where we really said, okay, why is this happening? Is this something that we're creating? Is this what our product is naturally leading us to? Is this because the sales team is setting certain expectations? And so it was the other leaders on our CS team, the people that were responsible for delivering those insights, people that were responsible for managing the customer relationship. And we sat together and said, what is allowing this to happen? Why are we getting into this place? And we realized it was how we were enabling our team, how we were setting expectations with our team, how we were surfacing those product insights to clients. It was us. And so it really led us down a path of let's go redo some of these things. We're going to re-enable some of the team. We're going to change some of our reporting. We're going to rethink how we deliver things. So it started at a more executive level because we were so determined to get focused on customers, but we operationalized it within the different components of the customer success team.
Got it. And when you get into that operationalizing of it, like you mentioned at a high level, some of like the reporting and kind of the operationalizing of it, like, can you maybe get a little tactical, like maybe one example of like, how do you turn this really, really important insight into something that the team is rallying behind and truly changing behaviors?
Yeah. Look, it's a lot to have to stand in front of somebody who's a professional, who's working really, really hard and tell them, I think we can do better, right? That's a tough conversation for any of us to have with people that are passionate and taking care of customers. So we took that part of it really, really seriously. And so part of that is we got to bring people along and help them see, number one, this is the vision of what we're trying to get to. And instead of, if we really want to create value for customers, which everybody on the team wants to do, we have to shift from here to here. So there's a couple steps. Number one, we had to rethink the formatting of our deliverables. And in fact, we're going through this process again because we're seeing other ways to get even better for customers. But at the time, it was shifting some of the data that we were showing so that we were not highlighting this one data attribute that was creating so many issues. So we went through and did a number of workshops to rework some of those deliverables. So they had a way of highlighting what mattered most. But we also had to do some work to kind of re-educate the team. And so we had some fun enablement sessions. We made it a little competitive. We actually brought people along with us and put the investment in helping them. We didn't just say, hey, here's a new format. We want you to talk this way. Because these were already people that were doing their jobs really well and had committed to doing what we had already asked them to do. So we really had to put the time in to workshop the format, change it, and then really go intentionally enable the team. And I know what happens a lot for all parts of post sales is you tend to feel like we come up short on enablement. All those resources go into the really hard work that sellers do. And we let ourselves come up short on the post sale side, and we couldn't. We could not let ourselves come up short on enabling the team to go show up at a customer in a different way. So we ran a bunch of training sessions, practice sessions. We did a bunch of things to bring it to life. So to do that takes some time. So that had to start with, once this was discovered and we said, here's an issue, we need to go solve it. It was on me to go set expectations with CEO who I report to, with other parts of our leadership team. This is what we're going to go do. It's going to take us time. Here's how long it's going to take. Here's when we should start to see some results. And here's how we're going to validate that we're getting those results. So part of that was also setting really good expectations elsewhere, because I think we all know these changes don't happen overnight.
Yeah. There's so much to unpack there that I totally agree with. There's the one just thing that I don't want to gloss over is your point that you went through all this and now you're doing it again because there's more you can do to improve. And I think so frequently you speak with people that can get complacent and say, like, we did the work, we did our time and motion study last year, and we now know how to make the team efficient. We did a review of our sales process. We now know the company, the customer, it's always evolving. And it's great that you have that kind of consistent introspection. Not necessarily a question behind that, just a nice job. But if you have thoughts on that, I'd love to hear them.
If in the end, I think it's really simple what we're all trying to solve for. If we just think our customers are people just like us, so what do they really want? Right? They want to help their companies win. They want to look good in front of their premieres. They want to get promoted and make more money. And most people want to go home and have a great meal with people that matter to them. That's what most of us want. That's what most of them want. The pressure they're under to make all that stuff happen is constantly increasing and evolving. All the things we talk all the time, AI is putting pressure on us. What's that doing to our customers? The market's uncertain. What's that doing to our customers? They've got all those same challenges. So we have to be really sharp and willing to continually reinvest in staying up and staying ahead of where they are, and really being willing to have the humility to say what we're doing today maybe isn't going to be good enough in the future because their world is changing. And I'm only trying to make sure that I'm staying in step with where they are and where they're going. And if I'm not willing to reevaluate and continue to grow, I'm probably falling behind because they're moving ahead. That's their world. Any pressure we feel, they're just like us. They're at least feeling the same pressure, and a lot of times even more.
Yeah, totally. And as a customer of other companies, to me, like, you don't expect the company you're working with to be perfect, but you do expect them to be doing the work. And that, so it really shows when you're on the receiving end of a company that is putting in that the approach that you just walked through. I love that perspective. And then the other thing that you mentioned was just the context, like coaching with context. It's not do this because I say so. It's do this because there's clarity, reasoning, and we're going to bring you along. It's just so important in the management process of not just micromanaging, but managing with context. I love everything about that.
Yeah. And what I think is, if I can real quickly, what's interesting is, I think what happens a lot is when you're diagnosing a problem and you're brainstorming some solutions, the people that are part of that process, by the time you kind of start to exit that phase, of the process, you've studied this problem, you've talked about it, you've got a way of describing it. And so it feels like something that's very obvious. When you go share it with the next group of people, it's the first time they've heard it. And so it's maybe it doesn't make sense to them. Maybe it's jarring. So when you're giving context, it's really important to also understand it's very different the first time people hear things versus the 10th time. And you're probably on your 10th time hearing it and you've been thinking about it and processing it longer. So you have to, when you're sharing that context with people, you have to share it, reshare it, make sure that you give them the opportunity to ask questions and be okay with people not quite understanding it the first time you share it. We fall into that trap at every level where you're in conversations, talking about things and just understanding what it feels like for people the first time they hear it. Context is so important, but helping people take that context and apply it takes a little bit of time. And so you have to be both patient and persistent to make sure that that happens and not assume it's a one-time share and now we're moving on.
Yeah.
People don't work that way. At least I haven't experienced where the majority of people, they need a little more time and to let it kind of soak in a little bit before they can really go execute with that new context.
100%. Yeah. And so then the last piece, kind of going back to that original thread, you mentioned it takes a while, but you did kind of come up with, it sounds like some sort of measurement of the success of this initiative. Like, how did you measure and communicate the success of it moving forward?
Yeah, in the end, we were looking for signals from customer conversations, and again, a little bit around some health metrics, a little bit around some good growth metrics. But the key thing for us was just, we were looking for customers to confirm value. At the end of the day, anything I do, anything we do as a company, any hopes we have for retention, growth, all those things are the foundation is whether or not a customer is getting the value they hope to get out of the product. So we were just doing some basic measures and just looking for some signals. Part of what we were teaching the team as part of our process was how they were going to get feedback and confirmation from the client that, yes, this was valuable, this was great. And so we were just looking for some signals after we rolled this out, and we were looking to see before and after, what was the conversation like? Were customers confirming value? Was the time being spent on the parts that mattered most? The long tail of that, and we're just looking at it now because we just have enough data to say, hey, did that correlate to more retention and more growth? And we've got positive signals on that. But the easiest thing was, because it was about a conversation, did it change the nature of the conversation? And there's so many easy signals you can get now, not just out of simple call recording, but out of the AI and analytics you can put on top of it. So we were able to validate within 30 days, this is moving the needle pretty aggressively.
Yeah, that's amazing. It never ceases to make me smile. The functionality and power of AI right now across the board, and what you can do on a call coaching is wild. Any key takeaways that either you had personally from this experience, or that you'd want to have someone take away from listening to this session? You already had a lot in there that I can splice together as key takeaways, but giving you one more opportunity here.
Yeah, look, I think I would say this, that, man, what a privilege we have when you work in the customer success world to be on the front lines of seeing all the hard company work and how that translates into value for customers. It also means you have the painful job of seeing where the company falls short. So part of the responsibility we have that goes with that privilege is to go back to the rest of the company and help the company close those gaps and solve problems for customers. And it's very easy for us to look everywhere else for where those problems exist. My encouragement is to start with ourselves, right? Look in the mirror and figure out what can we do better first before we ever ask anybody else to do something better to deliver for customers. And I'm not talking about being heroics and doing things we shouldn't be doing, but let's be willing to have the humility to consider that sometimes part of the challenge for creating value and consistently for customers starts with how we show up every day.
Well said. Well, a pleasure as always to have a conversation with you, David. Again, as I mentioned, David always has nuggets that he's putting on LinkedIn, so I highly recommend the follow if you aren't already. And Thanks again.
Absolute pleasure. It was always great to chat with you. Thank you for this opportunity. Look forward to talking soon.